I want to show you guys something. I want to show you guys something real quick. Okay, we're done with the monk. We're done. One of the most amazing things as a creator, when we find our idols and our heroes repeat what we say. They might not know you exist, but they say things that affirm the kind of the mentality and the approach that you take on D&D, right? And I found a couple of videos this week that really did that for me. And you know that I talk on this channel a lot about how the lore and flavor text around classes and other features are simply just that. They are descriptive, they are not prescriptive, right? Meaning that if you are playing a monk, being a monk or a ninja or coming from a monastic place is that flavor text. And if you strip that away, you can replace it with something else and changes nothing about the mechanics, but becomes something new and something uniquely yours, right? So I was actually doing some research for an upcoming video. I was looking at a video by Keith Baker. And Keith Baker almost word for word kind of went over what I talked about in my Wizards Can Be Druids or Druids Can Be Wizards 2 video, which I think was really cool. But enough of the subtext or the lead in. I'm gonna show you guys.
It's one of the things that will be working in there is the whole thing to me with classes is a class in D&D has the mechanics, what it actually does. Mm-hmm. And then it has a layer of flavor over it. A bard is a musician, a barbarian is a savage. But to me, that part is optional. So this is the point, is a warlock uses magic in a different way than a sorcerer or a wizard. And that part is absolute. What defines the warlock is the unique way in which they do magic. Mm-hmm. Now, the actual mechanism of the patron is something that you can decide what are you doing with, what do you want to do with it. Taking the barbarian, a barbarian is a savage person, who goes into a rage. And you can play them as, they come from the demon wastes or they come from the Eldeen reaches and, they are an uncivilized person. On the other hand, in one of my campaigns, we have a Warforged barbarian who the whole idea of his rage isn't so much anger as it's sort of shifting into a battle mode.
Right.
Where he
like
sort
Henry
of and he just and he sort of buffs up and that's why he takes less damage and he just can't maintain it for very long. And
so there you go. That's I think he goes on to a little other things, but that right there. This is his interview that he did on D&D Beyond, and he is talking about, hey, your patron doesn't have to be a freaking patron. It doesn't have to be something in the sky, but just the mechanics of what that patron or that relationship is can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be what it says on the paper. It doesn't have to be a long lost god. It can be an organization. It can be an affiliation that you're with. I feel like he states that barbarians doesn't have to be a rage-filled nomad. It can be someone civilized, and that rage can take on different mechanics, right? Which I think is really cool. We're actually going to go on because he does go into something else too.
To me, as I said, it's that kind of thing. A bard can be a musician and a song person, but you can also say, my bard is a spy who just knows a little bit of magic and is, really good at talking to people. Mm-hmm. Or my bard's a wand slinger, as we talked about.
That's cool. That's cool.
And so that's one thing I always encourage people to do is don't be limited. Mechanics are mechanics, and they're there to define how your character works. Mm-hmm. But the bit on top of that is story. And if you and your game master, as long as your dungeon master agrees with your idea.
Okay, this is what he says. He says that it's just a story. It's the story that's put on top. If your character is telling a different story, if your DM is telling a different story than what WotC or the Forgotten Realms is trying to tell, then it's okay to replace those flavor texts. It's okay to take those away and make it something else. If it makes it easier for you, stop calling it a monk, right? Stop calling it a monk. take the monk off and say, oh, this is a, just because the word is in the chat, a pugilist, right? Instead of a monk, it is a godborn. I don't know, right? And then with that story, you can use the same exact mechanics or change it however you want to be, but then using that to tell a different story. I think that's super cool.
I'm playing a Warforged Druid in a game that's just starting up. And the whole idea is, I don't know nothing about nature. It is just, I have the ability to alter my body, to change shape.
To adapt.
Yeah, the spells I've chosen are things that all fit with the idea of this is just me using my body, which is made of roots and such, in an interesting way.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. He was a Warforged Druid, right? Who's not an actual human being with like more like robotic kind of thing. And I've heard people like bring up, oh, just be like a Transformer Druid, which I think it would be pretty cool. And I do think that's pretty cool. So let's go into the second video that I found just this week, and actually came out this week. And as I was watching, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like he gave an example. This time we're looking at Matthew Mercer.
I think when you start playing role-playing games too, when you're learning the rules, you're learning how the game's dynamic works. It's very common to let kind of the descriptions that exist in the game set the tone and really kind of let you know how it should be. And then the more comfortable you get, it's quicker for some people than others, you can begin to realize that the rules can be the same, but the flavor can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. So this too, the stories that are there for a reason. And those are great ways to play and perfect for newcomers who are very familiar with those stories. And they can interact with those stories in a very familiar way to allow them to play out their fantasies that they've seen on the screen, right? But then there's also times where you're like, okay, I've played this. I want to see how we can change that. And that's where your creativity comes in. Because as creators, as people, we are imaginative, creative people that create our own stories. And saying that we have to stick to somebody else's story, to me, I don't like, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that kind of thinking. But we as people are made to create, made to improve. And so taking an idea that has been done and changing it to something else just because we're familiar with it, we've done some other things before, we want to take it a new way, nothing is wrong with that, and you make something completely new. That's pretty cool.
That fits within your character's theme. I think it's like Imogen, Laura's character.
Example.
Was based on a sorcerer subclass that is a really, really cool mechanical class, but the theming of it in the book is very like dark tentacles and, like alien...
Arms of Adari.
Like,
kinda.
Yeah, he's talking about the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, which is Imogen's subclass in Critical Role. And the subclass, Aberrant Mind, right, the flavor text or the story that it invokes is you were basically probed with some far realm creature, and because of that interaction with them, you became aberrant. You're like a mad scientist or a mad person. You're possessed by these numbers and sigils of this far realm that your brain cannot comprehend and understand, and so you gain these powers, right? Imogen is a little horse girl. She's a horse girl in Critical Role. That's what she is. That's her character. She's a horse girl that has little psychic powers, but as well as lightning powers, right? And it's funny to me because like people can watch Critical Role and say, oh, that's so cool, but then comment on my videos and say, oh, that should just be another class because the Ludo narrative doesn't fit. Yes, it does. Because I changed it. But here we go.
Yeah, like very, very kind of cosmic horror, stuff. And she's like, I love what it does, but I don't want to be that. Yeah. And so it functions pretty much the same, but we just reskinned some of the spells, we reskinned some of the abilities and made it her own unique thing, even though it operates the same as the class and the rules in there. And I love when any player feels excited to just take something and go, how can I make this more mine? How can I make this more unique to what I've built and want to play? And I think she's done a great job with that.
Yeah.
But isn't that
that's yes. 100 times yes. 100 times yes. That's the reason that you reflavor. That's the reason that you allow that creative role play, or those creative options for your players, because they get so excited to make something their own. Just seeing that Matthew Mercer like has that same mentality that you're like, yes, the rules are there, yes, the flavor is there, But you can change the flavor and the mechanics stay the same. Nothing changes about the rules of the game. But in so doing, you make the player happy. You make the player excited. That's cool. And that's why I reflavor.